Let's go to the White House right now, where President Donald Trump has more harsh words for House Democrats. So get this. The president is angered by a Washington newspaper's report saying that some Democratic lawmakers released a video urging members of the military to ignore unlawful orders. In fact, look at this. Trump said on Truth Social this morning, "This is really bad and dangerous to our country. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. Seditious behavior from traitors. Lock them up." And then, a short time later, the president finished with this thought: seditious behavior, punishable by death. Heavy words there. Let's talk about them. CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman joins us now from the White House. So, Willie, take us through what prompted these posts from the president. He is clearly triggered by something.
Yeah, that's right, Reed. Well, this video was posted on social media. Democratic lawmakers who also served in the military posting this message to troops, saying essentially that they don't have to follow an unlawful order. Then you saw Trump's response, posting the Washington Examiner article about that social media post, and calling for these Democratic officials, saying that their behavior is seditious and punishable by death. Now, we are seeing a response from House Democratic leadership, who are calling on the president to take this post down. They go into a statement. They say they condemn the president's disgusting and dangerous death threats against members of Congress, and call on the House Republicans to forcefully do the same. They then go on to, as I mentioned, call the president to take the post down, calling it an unhinged social media post, and for him to recant his violent rhetoric before someone gets killed. Now, I'll note that Speaker Johnson, the leader of the Republicans in the House, is also responding to this as well. When he was asked about the punishable by death part of the president's statement, he essentially said that the president was defining the crime of sedition. He then goes on to tell reporters in this exchange there on Capitol Hill that it was wildly inappropriate, talking about the video that was put out by the Democrats, and that the DOJ and the Pentagon are reviewing the matter. So a lot of moving parts with this developing story, and we'll of course monitor it. And I anticipate that the press secretary will be asked about this when she takes to the podium there in the next coming minutes. Once we see her, we'll of course bring you any developments that happens with this story, Reed.
And we are there. Willie James Inman, thank you so much for that report from the White House. For the past hour, we have been looking in and listening to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at the White House press briefing room talk about many headlines. So moments ago, our Nancy Cordes asked a question to White House Press Secretary Leavitt. This is a question regarding some overnight pretty incendiary comments President Trump made about Democrats on social media. Here's her question and the response.
Caroline, this morning President Trump accused 6 Democratic lawmakers of seditious behavior punishable by death. Just to be clear, does the president want to execute members of Congress?
No. Let's be clear about what the president is responding to, because many in this room want to talk about the president's response, but not what brought the president to responding in this way. You have sitting members of the United States Congress who conspired together to orchestrate a video message to members of the United States military, to active duty service members, to members of the national security apparatus, encouraging them to defy the president's lawful orders. The sanctity of our military rests on the chain of command. And if that chain of command is broken, it can lead to people getting killed. It can lead to chaos. And that's what these members of Congress, who swore an oath to abide by the Constitution, are essentially encouraging. We have 1.3 active duty service members in this country. And if they hear this radical message from sitting members of Congress, that could inspire chaos, and it could incite violence, and it certainly could disrupt the chain of command. These 3 members of Congress, I will also add, knew exactly what they were doing. You look at Alyssa Slotkin. She's a former member of the CIA. Mark Kelly was a captain in the U.S. Navy. Maggie Goodlander was a naval officer, and notably, she is also the wife of Joe Biden's national security former advisor, Jake Sullivan. And so these members knew what they were doing. They were leading into their credentials as former members of our military, as veterans, as former members of the national security apparatus, to signal to people serving under this commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, that you can defy him and you can betray your oath of office. That is a very, very dangerous message, and it perhaps is punishable by law. I'm not a lawyer. I'll leave that to the Department of Justice and the Department of War to decide.
But the president has
Chris,
frequently, but Caroline, can I just follow up? The president and the vice president, for that matter, have accused the other side of encouraging political violence. Isn't that exactly what the president is doing when he says that members of Congress should be killed?
Why aren't you talking about what these members of Congress are doing to encourage and incite violence? They are literally saying to 1.3 million active duty service members not to defy the chain of command, not to follow lawful orders.
Actually,
Every
they said
single
you can refuse an illegal order, which
but
is
they're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not. Every single order that is given to this United States military by this commander-in-chief and through this chain of command, through the Secretary of War, is lawful. And the courts have proven that. This administration has an unparalleled record at the Supreme Court because we are following the laws. We don't defy court orders. We do things by the books. And to suggest and encourage that active duty service members defy the chain of command is a very dangerous thing for sitting members of Congress to do. And they should be held accountable, and that's what the president wants to see. Phil.
Thank you.
All right, so we are referencing posts made to Truth Social by President Donald Trump overnight, where he talked about Democrats creating a video. And this is his response: seditious behavior punishable by death. Talking about that video that was created and then given to members of the U.S. military. Now, there was some back and forth there. You heard Nancy Cordes saying, well, what that video actually said was that they should not follow unlawful orders by the president. But this obviously is the response by the president of the United States. So let's talk about it. Live now to CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro in Washington following that briefing. So, Aaron, your takeaway from what she just said.
I think it's notable, just to reference for our audience, what is at the heart of that video, of the reaction we got from President Trump this morning, which is the deployment of National Guard to American cities, which was the topic that kind of instigated this video from congressional Democrats. And while Levitt mentioned that they have won many court rulings, I think it's important to note that there's still a pending Supreme Court ruling on the National Guard troops who were sent to Chicago. That's why you saw a couple days ago the administration pull back troops from Chicago and Portland as the legal battles continue. You brought up President Trump's post, but I just want to bring up the quotes from that video that spurred all of this. As you mentioned, and as Nancy mentioned in her follow-up, these were Democratic members of Congress who said to active military and intelligence officers to say that they should refuse illegal orders. One of the quotes from that video is, quote, "The American people need you to stand up for our laws and our Constitution." That was panned by several Republicans, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, but Trump really ratcheted up the rhetoric this morning, claiming that they were engaging these Democrats in seditious behavior, quote, punishable by death. I think it's important to note Levitt was asked specifically if the president wants these members of Congress to be executed, which is one read of what, he posted this morning. And she started by saying out flat out no before criticizing the video at large. I think her saying it's, quote, sending a very, very dangerous message, the Democrats in this video, is interesting given the blatant nature of the President Trump's post this morning.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of blowback. In fact, some prominent Democrats are asking the president to take that down. It sticks in my memory that some of their words, and I'm paraphrasing here, are that if he doesn't take this down, somebody's going to get killed, to Nancy Cordes' question to the press secretary regarding the risk of political violence.
Yeah, and Senator Slotkin, as well as other Democrats that were in that video, put out a joint statement this morning saying, quote, "Every American must unite and condemn the president's calls for our murder and political violence. This is a time for moral clarity." We'll see if President Trump adds on to what he has posted this morning, but certainly getting a lot of condemnation from Democrats on Capitol Hill.
All right, Aaron Navarro in Washington, D.C. with that discussion there as Caroline Levitt is asked about that very fiery post from President Trump on Truth Social.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to The Takeout. We did not expect to start tonight with Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We are, because a debate, if you can call it that, broke out today over what it means. and calls by the President of the United States for charges of treason against 6 Democratic members of Congress. Treason, as you might know, is punishable by death. President Trump amplified a Truth Social post calling for the lawmakers' death by hanging. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are. Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice says service personnel must obey lawful orders. Failure to obey lawful orders can result in court-martial. There is, however, an important qualifier. Military personnel have a duty to disobey a manifestly illegal order. That means the order's illegality must be, quote, clear and obvious. Examples: orders to target civilians, orders to falsify documents, orders to commit crimes. 6 Democrats in Congress, all of whom served in the United States military or the U.S. intelligence community, released a video to members of the military and intelligence community, and here, from that video, are the most pertinent excerpts.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk. This administration is pitting our uniformed military
And intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad, but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
So let's dig into this a bit. In California, the Democratic governor challenged the legality of Trump's National Guard deployments there. For a member of the military, following that order to deploy would be legal. Yes, legal. Why? Because of the order's presumptive legality in that it flowed in the proper chain of command from the chief executive of the United States on down. The lawmakers who put out that video said only illegal orders can be disobeyed. Nevertheless, Trump called the video, quote, seditious behavior at the highest level, unquote. Said the lawmakers, quote, should be arrested and put on trial, unquote. And here is the repost calling for the lawmakers to be hanged. House Speaker Mike Johnson, by way of defense of Trump, said the Democrats told troops to, quote, disobey orders, unquote. You can judge that line of defense for yourself. There is, of course, some history here. Trump, many, many months ago, warned about enemies here at home. He meant Democrats in government. Listen.
We have 2 enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries.
Democratic leaders in the House and Senate today denounced Trump's rhetoric, as did Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. One of the senators in the video, Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, a former CIA officer, had this response to the president.
If fear is contagious, so is courage. And I think when a lion's share of Americans understand that it is in their own power to push back on this kind of rhetoric and this kind of threat, that's when we actually turn the tide. And I'm not going to shut up because Donald Trump is threatening me.
Starting us off tonight, North Lawn of the White House, Nancy Cordes. Nancy, you had an exchange with Caroline Leavitt during today's White House press secretary briefing. Let's play that exchange for our audience.
The president and the vice president, for that matter, have accused the other side of encouraging political violence. Isn't that exactly what the president is doing when he says that members of Congress should be killed?
Why aren't you talking about what these members of Congress are doing to encourage and incite violence? They are literally saying to 1.3 million active duty service members not to defy the chain of command, not to follow lawful orders.
Actually, what they said is you can refuse an illegal order.
But they're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not.
So the White House is holding on to that idea of the suggestion, the implication from this video. Nancy?
That's right. The case that Caroline Leavitt made today is that it isn't the president's speech that is incendiary. It is this video put out by Democrats in which she said that they incentivize the 1.3 million members of the military to disobey the chain of command, something that she said could lead to chaos, even lead to people getting killed. But there was this uproar on Capitol Hill, Major, after the president said that these 6 Democratic lawmakers should be put to death, a lot of Democrats who said that President Trump was putting them at risk, that he has supporters who are unhinged, and that he has just sent a powerful message to them that the Democrats are the enemy and that they deserve to die. The president didn't then repeat his threat, but he didn't delete it either.
And Nancy, this week alone, there is a bit of a backdrop to this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, has said, because she has now since broken with President Trump, or President Trump broke with her, that she has been subjected to greater threats of violence. In Indiana, where the president is unhappy with state lawmakers over their unwillingness to draw new congressional lines there, members of the state Senate have said they've experienced threats and swatting episodes in Indiana. These things are playing out this week. It's a live wire.
Right. And these 6 Democratic lawmakers have now been granted additional security, Major, because they anticipate that there will be a larger volume of threats coming their way. And one Democratic Senator, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, said today, we have kids. And, you know, every lawmaker is now getting on the phone with his or her chief of staff to figure out how we can better protect ourselves this weekend. So, you know, there's already a heightened state of alert. We know that over the past few years that threats to lawmakers have increased exponentially, and they argue that this is just throwing another log on the fire.
From the North Lawn, Nancy Cordes, thank you so very, very much.
And we're joined now by Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who joins us from Tucson, Arizona. Welcome back to Face the Nation, Senator.
Thank you for having me on.
I want to pick up where we left off on this topic of political violence. I know your family has suffered because of it very, very directly. And then this past week, the president called that video you participated in sedition. You heard me read what he said again this morning: sedition at the highest level and a major crime. Do you have credible threats? How concerned are you about your security at this point?
Well, Margaret, what the president said is very serious. I didn't think he would step over that line, calling for the execution of members of Congress. And his words carry tremendous weight, more so than anybody else in the country, and he should be aware of that. And because of what he says, there is now an increased threats against us. I'm not going to get into, details on my personal security, but as the husband of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, I understand what political violence is. The president should as well. Just like Gabby, somebody tried to assassinate him, and he should understand that his words could have serious, serious consequences.
And I remember just weeks ago hearing from the president and other Republicans about the need to dial back the rhetoric after the tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk. When it comes to
what happened to that? That was 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Where are they now? We've heard very little, basically crickets from Republicans in the United States Congress about what the president has said about hanging members of Congress.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Why aren't we hearing from your Republican colleagues? And in terms of your security, I understand there was a request for you to get a boost in Capitol Hill's security support. Are Republican members on board with that?
I don't know. I've heard them say, very little about this. I think, the president tries to intimidate them. He tries to intimidate Congress. He looks at government accountability as a nuisance. And I think it's really important for people to understand, Margaret, that the message he sent a couple days ago was he declared that loyalty to the Constitution is now punishable by death. Those are serious words. Coming from the President of the United States, he's trying to intimidate us. But Margaret, I'm not going to be intimidated. You just heard Jason Crow. He's not going to be intimidated either. We both served our country. We swore an oath. All we said is we reiterated what basically is the rule of law, that members of the military cannot follow illegal orders.
Well, on that point, in terms of lawful and unlawful orders, it gets complicated for rank and file to understand. I understand, and other networks have reported, that the senior judge advocate down at Southcom raised serious doubts about the legality of the strikes on those alleged drug boats, but was contradicted by lawyers at the executive branch. Have you spoken to the Southcom commander? Are you hearing that there are unlawful orders being given?
Well, we're hearing the same thing that you are. The administration hasn't shared much information with us. I read the legal analysis. It was just like the briefs. They're tying themselves in knots trying to explain why what they're doing with regards to these drug boats is legal. And it's questionable at best. One of our biggest allies, the United Kingdom, recently stopped sharing intelligence with us in the Caribbean because they question whether this is legal or not. We've been asking for more briefings from the right people. We have not received them, but the information that you just shared with me is the public information. I don't have much more beyond that.
Well, and the French government has said it's a violation of international law and the law of the sea. That's what our allies are saying about those strikes that are happening there. But
Margaret, getting back to the junior
made this
folks,
video?
No. The reason why we made this video is a couple things. This president, from before he was in office, as he was a candidate to the time he was in office in his first administration, has said things that cause us great concern. There's a trend here. When he was running for president the first time, he talked about he wanted the military. He said the military should be killing the families of terrorists. And when he was told that was illegal, this was on a debate stage, he basically said that the military will not refuse to follow my orders, that they will carry out his orders regardless of what they were. Shooting protesters in the legs is something he brought up in his first administration. And thankfully, Mark Esper, his Secretary of Defense, and Mark Milley, basically told him you cannot do that. If they weren't there, think of what possibly could have happened.
I also want to ask you about something the Department of Defense posted. It said it's now investigating Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, retired naval captain, over his participation in a video last week. Well, if you can tell us, is it over that video? He made this video with other Democratic lawmakers, essentially saying, members of the military, you have an obligation to not follow any kind of illegal orders. Senator Kelly says he learned about this on social media. Help us understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. So there was this video, and Senator Mark Kelly, who is a retired naval captain and a former astronaut as well, was part of this video. And the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, sent out a statement following a statement that came from the Department of War, the Pentagon. And he essentially pointed out why what he calls the seditious six, why this was so wrong, and why he was pointing out and the military is investigating Senator Mark Kelly. He says, and I'm quoting his statement here, he says, they're foolish, screed cows, doubt and confusion, which only puts our warriors in danger. 5 of the 6 individuals in that video do not fall under the jurisdiction. 1 is CIA and 4 are former military but not retired. So they are no longer subject to UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And then the Secretary of Defense goes on to point out that Mark Kelly is a retired naval commander and is still subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So they're perhaps looking into this, investigating the senator for these comments he and others made, but specifically with him, whether or not military members should follow through, or they should not follow through, rather, with illegal orders. Now, the senator himself, he essentially is saying that he didn't hear about this investigation until it was posted on social media, and he posted a statement himself, and I'm going to read part of his statement that he sent out just a while ago. He said, Secretary Hegseth's tweet is the first I heard of this. I also saw the president's post saying I should be arrested, hanged, and put to death. And he then goes on to say, if this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. So certainly some strong words and pushback coming from Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona there, Lindsay.
And he spoke with our colleague Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation yesterday. I encourage everybody to go look up that interview. Willie, thank you.
The FBI's Counterterrorism Division is planning to interview the 6 Democratic lawmakers who posted a video last week reminding members of the intelligence community and the U.S. military that they are allowed to, and in fact obligated to, refuse any illegal order. Here's reaction from one of those 6 lawmakers, Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Last night, the Counterterrorism Division at the FBI sent a note to the members of Congress saying they are opening what appears to be an inquiry against the 6 of us. To be honest, the president's reaction and the use of the FBI against us is exactly why we made the video.
Nicole Skanga joins me now to discuss all this. Nicole, what is the FBI's actual jurisdictional role here?
Yeah, Major, to set the table, and it is Thanksgiving week after all, the DOJ and FBI are exploring any wrongdoing on the part of these 6 lawmakers. Now, this all stems from that 90-second video, but in recent days, we've heard President Trump and Secretary Hegseth label the lawmakers' conduct as sedition. The FBI opens inquiries into potential criminal behavior every single day, but here's why the FBI's involvement here is a little bit confusing, Major. There's no federal crime called seditious behavior. The phrase has really no legal meaning. The closest federal statute, seditious conspiracy, 18 U.S. Code 2384, requires use of force or a conspiracy to levy war against the United States. Now, if that sounds familiar, after January 6th, our viewers might remember that DOJ charged Oath Keepers and members of the Proud Boys with seditious conspiracy for then allegedly orchestrating violent attempts to stop the transfer of presidential power. But if we're going through our legal checklist here, we need an agreement of 2 or more people that conspired and agreed with one another, use of force, not just speech or political pressure, an unlawful objective like overthrowing or destroying the U.S. government. And so far, the conduct that was described in the lawmakers' videos doesn't meet those elements, at least on its face. So it's unclear what charges might actually be involved. Also, Major, it is a distraction from the bigger picture, which is the questions about, are these strikes on drug boats legally justified? Is the U.S. legitimately in an armed conflict with drug traffickers? And is use of force here lawful, where there's perhaps no imminent threat to the United States, though some in the administration would argue there is that threat and would point you to drug deaths?
And Nicole, with everything you just said, there's also a couple of things we should remind our audience about. There's a First Amendment protection. There's also a speech and debate clause protection from every lawmaker that shields them from certainly civil and criminal inquiries. So again, what the FBI has in front of it is a sort of edict that comes from the Justice Department or the White House, possibly both, but not much of a roadmap to pursue.
That's exactly right, Major. And the criticism, which has been a constant within the Department of Justice and especially under this administration, is that the administration is weaponizing the Department of Justice for its own political means. Now, in the meantime, we're hearing from all of these lawmakers that have contacted U.S. Capitol Police. They've filed complaints about, threats, concerns about their own personal safety and the safety of their offices, their staff. We've heard from the lawmakers who say their offices have received thousands of calls, emails. Pennsylvania Representative Chrissy Houlihan, who was one of these lawmakers, said 2 of her district offices have received bomb threats, and at least 2 of the lawmakers here, Jason Crow and Chris DeLuzio, have requested that U.S. Capitol Police investigate what they call intimidating, threatening, and concerning posts made by the president. Now, on Friday, we heard President Trump sort of backpedal in an interview on Fox News, denied he was threatening lawmakers, but he maintained that they had broken the law, and he continued to speak very loudly, accusing them of what he calls sedition, Major.
Nicole Skanga, thank you so much.